I want you to imagine something. Imagine you don't own anything. The gadgets you use, the food you eat, the place you live in, the modes of transport you use to get around, or anything else for that matter. Except, in spite of this, you can access all of these things, and more. When you go to a library to take out a book, oftentimes you're not actually purchasing that book, but are instead leasing it to use for a certain amount of time. You take out a book, read it, and then bring it back to the library, where you can either renew or return it. Now imagine if we applied this principle of access that you see in a library to many parts of the socio-economic sphere. Let me tell you something, it's already happening. Hi there, I'm Adam. Welcome to the second episode of the Fundamentals of FoRBEs. Today we're going to go into the concept of access over ownership and access economics. We're going to take a look at how it's different from the way we do things now, as well as its benefits over a property ownership based system. So, what is the idea of access over ownership? Today, we have a system of property norms. You buy things with money, you own them, and no one else can use those things without your explicit consent. This sounds fine in theory, but once you start taking current wealth disparities and power dynamics into account, the system starts to look quite suboptimal. A common occurrence within capitalism, as a result of property ownership, is the paradox of having an abundance of goods and services, but limited access to them. There are more homes and abandoned buildings in developed countries than homeless people. We produce more than enough food to feed the world's population, but a third is wasted. The basic gist of access over ownership is to reverse this, as in having an economy where no one really owns anything, but everyone has access to everything. In the context of a resource-based economy, this is part of what would replace the system of property and trade we have now. Access would be applied to every part of socio-economic life, from the places we live in, to the tools we use, to forms of transportation, etc. Think of it kind of like a system of simultaneous ownership, everyone owning everything simultaneously. At any time, you could access any tool, any living space, any form of public transit, any basic need, whenever and wherever you want. You would no longer feel the need to pursue material wealth as much, as you would already have access abundance to everything you would want or need, for the amount of time you want to use it. A person could use something for a certain amount of time, and return it when they are done. They have little incentive to hoard, as they are able to access that thing again at any given time. A second person can make use of that same thing at a later time, and then a third person, a fourth, a fifth, etc. Only when there isn't enough to go around would we produce more of a resource-intensive product. This is done to ensure that resources are used as efficiently as possible. Moreover, a system of access, in conjunction with things like open source and modular design, which I will talk about in a later video, favours the production of durable, relevant, and high-quality products, eliminating planned obsolescence and reducing waste. We already have primitive access economies. Billions of them around the world in fact. Everyone within a typical household can readily access food from the refrigerator, water from the tap, entertainment from TVs, consoles and smart devices, which can also be used to access an abundance of information on the web, among other things. You typically don't see people hoarding all of the food around them within their own home, and this is because they have an access point where they know they can go and get food at any time. Sure, a lot of people around the world don't have access to some of these, and that's a problem, but I'm just trying to illustrate a point here. Anyway, back to the video. So with access, what we're actually kind of doing is taking the behaviour of the home and expanding it to the community, creating something I call the communal home, where we blur the lines between the home and the community, so that in a way, the community becomes a second home of sorts. Allow me to present an example of what free access might look like in an RBE. Let's say we have a block of apartments. There are 100 people demanding an apartment, with 110 vacant apartments in a building. Each of these 100 people can choose any apartment to live in at any time, so long as they are vacant. If someone chooses to move, they may do so, and will gain access to another vacant home. Why have a mansion, when you could have millions of free homes accessible to you, all around the world, and at any given time? When we incorporate a system of access for homes within an RBE, we could make it possible for someone to live in one part of the world for a month, and then travel to somewhere completely different the next, with all the comforts they previously had, because that would no longer depend on location. We could eradicate lack of shelter, abject poverty, all these kinds of things on a global scale. For many other parts of an RBE, things would function much like a library or online encyclopedia. You find the things you need, you use them, and then you deposit them back for later use. During a product's downtime, it could be improved or maintained, either by a person or automaton. One of the best arguments for access over ownership is that today, you're not using a particular thing all the time. Take a car for instance. You might use your car for 2 hours a day to get to and from work, with occasional drives on the weekends. This isn't very efficient. Having a car for nearly every person, only for them to use it for a small fraction of the day, is a huge waste of energy and resources. If we averaged out the amount of time each person used the car for, we could work out how many cars to produce for a certain amount of people. Or better yet, we could optimize our city systems for public transportation. Doing this would reduce demand for resources we use to produce things, while also fulfilling the demand for the utility of those things. One of the main criticisms of having a society where people can freely access goods and services is that there would be a lack of incentive for people to work and produce things. The truth is, even today, people work for many reasons other than to gain material wealth. Think of all the scientists, artists, carers, firefighters, and so many others who do their job because they genuinely enjoy it, or because they feel they have a duty to do their job. If you just spent all day sitting around not doing much, chances are you'd get bored pretty quickly, and will eventually yearn for something to do. In this way, humans are almost natural labourers, if not for material necessity or gain, for enjoyment, for reputation, knowledge, or perhaps out of sheer altruism. These things are suppressed in our current social order, because we are coerced into working to survive. However, when you remove the necessity of work, people will have other motivators to be productive. This begs the question, why? Why strive for a system of free access? Did people work for this? Do they deserve it? Human rights are a social construct that has been constitutionalized into popular thought, and for good reason. We, as the human race, have chosen to recognize various rights because they are beneficial to our survival, our well-being, they appeal to our freedom, etc. As humans, we were born on planet Earth. Our planet is what gave us the resources we use to produce things, to feed ourselves, and all the rest of it. So don't we deserve access to the riches of the very thing that birthed us as a human right? I'd argue so, and this is what advocates mean when we talk about declaring all natural resources the common heritage of mankind. When talking about access over ownership, it is important to consider how property emerged in the first place. Property norms arose out of scarcity of organised agriculture in the Neolithic Revolution. At the very beginning of civilization, grains were a scarce resource that people who cultivated them valued greatly. In order for others to access this resource, they would have to make a trade for something of equal value. Extrapolating from this, if property arose from material conditions of scarcity, systems of access must arise from relative abundance. Luckily, we are a technically advanced civilization, with advanced means of cultivating resources, using them to produce stuff, and distributing that stuff to people. With things like automation, industrial agriculture, and modern methods of generating energy, we can create an effective abundance of resources for people to access. We could very easily reach a state of access abundance with modern technology. When you implement things like resource management systems on top of that, you make this even easier. Earlier, I mentioned that one of the benefits of free access is its efficiency when you account for various factors in production and use. However, as I have previously alluded to, having access over ownership would also be a boon for most people's standard of living. If you are able to readily access any food, housing, amenities, information and else what, chances are you're able to live a pretty comfortable life. Not having to work for a living means you avoid the stresses of a monetary society, and this would no doubt have physical and mental health benefits. You'd have time to focus on what you like doing, in work and in leisure. You'd have more time to socialise, get fit, and educate yourself. Parents could settle down and spend more time with their kids, which would enrich their mental and emotional well-being. There'd be no more disputes over financial struggle, like we see so much in our current paradigm. The benefits are endless, we just have to get there, and we can do it. A shining example of how access has been implemented in our current system is tool libraries, of which the name is self-explanatory. Because we live in a world of money, these enterprises require money to run. They're plagued by a similar issue cooperatives have in this sense. But they work, and are more common than you think. There are currently around 60 tool libraries around the world, with 20 more in development. This might not sound much, but the concept is fairly new and is a growing trend. Unfortunately, the principle of access is being exploited by the rental and private transport industry. However, this is more of a tendency of capitalism than anything else. Ultimately, having a system of access over ownership is not only realistic and achievable, but is also a good way to have an economy that is efficient, sustainable, and enriches people's health and well-being. By achieving relative abundance through various means, we can create an economy where people are able to access goods and services free of money, trade, and servitude, and we can do this today. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I hope to make my videos more frequent as time passes, unless something goes horribly wrong, which I doubt. Nevertheless, if you like this video and want to see more content from myself, then why not subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Sharing these videos on social media helps the channel grow, as well as ideas like RBEs gain exposure. For now though, this is all I have. Tune in next time, where we'll look at a combination of concepts and technologies that make up another vital part of resource-based economies. But, thank you for watching. I've been Adam, and this is me signing off.